everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Blondie B here. Now if you're new here, please like and subscribe and follow me on Instagram. Whatever tips you have and your weight loss journey, all that good stuff. I'll leave the Instagram link below at Miss Blondie B. Now, today, or excuse me, well I guess it's technically Saturday morning. Once again, I've been procrastinating. Today we're going to be talking about the Rampart St murder house in New Orleans. So before we get into like the whole, the murders and all that, we're going to do a little bit of a backstory. And I'm like super nervous. So I'm still nervous. So basically the house resides at 826 Rampart St in New Orleans. Now, this is quite like the interesting murder story. So, it's Zack and Addie Hall, Zack Bowen and Addie Hall. So like I said, I'm gonna give some backstory. So Zack Bowen grew up in California, and he had married a woman 10 years older than him, and he had 2 children with her. Now, this was pre 9/11. So, in order to take care of his family and whatnot, he joined the military. Normal thing, a lot of men do it. He joined the military for, benefits. Well, 9/11 hit. And after 9/11, obviously we went into war. So he was a war hero, and he received several awards for service in the military, and he was military police and did 2 tours in Iraq. And after he came back, he had, PTSD, had a lot of things wrong with him. So him and his wife ended up getting a divorce. She left him, and he moved to New Orleans and became a bartender. So now let's get into Addie Hall. So Addie Hall, she grew up in North Carolina. She had rather a rough life. Excuse me, my cat is screaming at me. So when she moved to New Orleans, she became a bartender at the Spotted Cat. So they met, they met in the French Quarter, and they felt that they started dating and whatnot. Now, another thing about Addie is that she suffered from bipolar disorder, and she would, like most people, I'm not trying to stereotype, but I do know it is common for people with bipolar disorder to go off their medication and take it irregularly and all that. So she was doing that. So she did suffer from angry and uncontrollable outbursts. So like I said, they had met in the French Quarter, and immediately from the start, they had like a crazy relationship. Like it was just turbulence. Like, it's fueled by drugs and alcohol. You're in the French Quarter, you're in New Orleans, so it gets pretty wild down there. So they were dating for a few weeks, and then Katrina hit. Once Katrina hit, they decided to stick it out in this Category 5 hurricane. I don't know if you guys know a lot about Katrina, but it was absolutely detrimental to New Orleans, and it was absolutely devastating. It destroyed the whole city, with the exception of the French Quarter. So they decided to stick it out, and during this time, they ended up falling in love, and they were living in Addie's apartment, and they fell completely in love. Now they became famous in New Orleans, and they were in a lot of magazines for, being there to take care of the wayward people. They were, cooking for them. They would serve up drinks, and they were basically heroes. They were heroes at the time, and they were on the news, they were in media, doing interviews. There was photos of them on Time magazine. They were very much considered heroic. And my cat is being a little turd tonight. So, once this was all over and everything, the storm clears out, people move back to New Orleans, people start coming back, and I know, baby. People start coming back to New Orleans. Oh my God. Look out, sweetheart. People start moving back to New Orleans, and they start kind of, getting their lives back together, and start cleaning up the city and all that. Well, Addie wasn't handling it very well, and she wanted Zack to herself, and he was kind of wanting to go back with his ex-wife, and so it became much more of a violent thing, and they started doing even more drugs and drinking a lot, And so it started to just run rampant in the relationship, and they started fighting violently. They started having very violent fights, and there was rumors too that both of them were abusive to each other. So they do what any couple does, and they decide, well, we're not happy in our place, we're fighting a lot, let's move. So they decided to find some new digs, and they thought it'd fix something. So they were walking down Rampart Street one day, and they come across this little apartment for rent that's actually above one of New Orleans. At the time, it was New Orleans' most famous voodoo shop. So they go ahead and they start moving in, and soon after they move in, Addie discovers that Zack is cheating on her, or she believes that he's cheating on her. So she goes to the landlord, and she asks the landlord, can we just make the contract out or the lease out for the apartment in my name, because I'm going to kick Zack to the curb. He's cheating on me. Now, a couple days later, and it was around 1 o'clock in the morning. It was a Tuesday morning, October 5th, 2006. Zack, they get in a fight. They get in a big old fight again. That's what the rumors claim, that they get in a fight. And it gets blown out of proportion, whatever, and Zack strangles Addie to death. Now, in his drunken stupor, he falls asleep next to her corpse on the futon, and he gets up the next day and he goes to work. And, during this, the first couple days, he's not sure what to do with the body and whatnot, and people are calling him, hey, where's Addie? And he's saying, she went back to North Carolina, and he's coming up with these excuses. And a lot of people didn't believe that, because Addie considered herself, like, straight out of New Orleans. She considered that her home. So people were a little, they were thinking, like, that seems odd, but whatever. So this is where it starts getting weird. Really weird. And it's really disturbing. So over the next several days, Zack proceeds to cut up Addie's body in their bathtub with a hacksaw and a knife. And he disperses the pieces of her corpse into and on top of the stove. As well, he took her torso, stuck it in a black trash bag, and put it in the fridge. Then he stuck her head, after he shaved her head, he sticks her head in a pot on the stove. And then he placed her feet and hands inside of another pot and put it on the back burner. And then her arms and legs went in a roasting pan in the oven. Now, his reason for doing this, they say that, like, Zack is one of the only people that they've ever seen who's murdered somebody who actually cooked them and didn't have any intentions on eating them. So he's not like a Jeffrey Dahmer, or who's another one? I'm trying to think, like, that, like, would try to eat people. I definitely know, like, I think Ed Gein was another one. And so he had no intentions of eating her. He just figured, like, I could separate the bone from the flesh, and it'd be easier to dispose of the body. Now, during this time, so after he murders her, he goes out and he starts spending a lot of time with his friends. He's heavily doing drugs. He's partying like crazy. I mean, it is New Orleans, so he's just, like, going wild for the next 2 weeks. Then, on a Tuesday evening, October 17th, 2006, jumped off the 7th floor of the Omni Royal Orleans Hotel, and he had left a handwritten note, his dog tags, inside of a plastic bag in his back pocket, and the gate key to him and Addie's apartment in his front pocket. So, but prior to jumping off the 7th floor of this hotel, he had burned himself 28 times with a cigarette, one time for every every year in his life that he felt like was a failure. He was also seen pacing back and forth. Like, apparently he was nervous about killing himself. Like, you just killed your girlfriend. You brutally murdered your girlfriend 2 weeks ago, and now you're nervous about killing yourself. So, in his pocket, like I said, there was a letter. And now the letter was addressed to police only. And this is what led the police to the detective, the detectives to the home of Addie and Zach's landlord for questioning. Now, the landlord let them into the apartment, and the first thing the police noticed was the temperature. It was cold. It was freezing, and it didn't really smell like anything. So the conditioner was set to 60 degrees on full blast, and they said it felt like a meat locker on the inside. And then when they find, there was no smell of rotting flesh, and the bathroom was clean. There was no traces of blood, but on the walls, written in silver spray paint, were the words, "I love her, I'm a total failure, and look in the oven," with an arrow pointing to the stove door. Now, he had also written, along with all this, his ex-wife's phone number in hopes that the police would report the crime to her first. Now, I'm going to read a couple, a note that he had written. This is the note that they found on his body. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read a journal entry that they had found. So the note states, "This is not accidental. I had to take my own life to pay for the one I took. If you send a patrol car to 826 North Rampart, you will find the dismembered corpse of my girlfriend Addie in the oven, on the stove, and in the fridge, and a full signed confession from myself, Zach Bowman." Now, obviously, that's the letter. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read his journal entry. So, his journal entry was dated Monday 16th, October, 2 a.m. And it states, "Today is Monday the 16th, October, 2 a.m. I killed her at 1 a.m. Thursday, the 5th of October. I very calmly strangled her. It was very quick. Halfway through the task, I stopped and thought about what I was doing. The decision to halt the first idea and move to plan B, the crime scene you are in now, came after a while. I scared myself, not by the action of calmly strangling the woman I've loved for 1.5 years, and then desecrating her body, but by my entire lack of remorse. I've known forever how horrible of a person I am, ask anyone, and decided to quit my jobs and spend the $1,500 cash I had being happy until I killed myself. So that's what I did. Good food, good drugs, good strippers, good friends, and any loose ends I may have had. I didn't contact any of my family, so I'll explain the shock. And I had a fantastic time living out my days. It's just about time now." Now, days before, Zach Bowen murdered Addie, and they moved into that infamous apartment at 826 North Rampart. Now, let's go into some a little bit more creepy spiritual. So, like I said, the apartment sat above a voodoo temple, a very famous one in New Orleans, and it was the voodoo temple of Priestess Miriam's, and the name of it was Priestess Miriam's Voodoo Spiritual Temple. And it was extremely well respected in the New Orleans community. A lot of people go there, but people claim that perhaps there was some sort of dark demon that had either been summoned up there or was brought in by one of the patrons. And it had an effect on Zach's, his overwhelming mental illness and possibly his PTSD and his violent outbursts in the relationship, and possibly that's why he murdered Addie. Even though there's this idea and there's that conspiracy there, voodoo is actually considered a very healing and calming religion in New Orleans. People don't typically use it for bad there. But the temple was founded in 1990 by Priestess Miriam and her then husband. And they had moved to that location in 1991, and then they were there till 2016 until a fire broke out and destroyed the building. So she was there quite some time before, the murders happened in 2006. So I guess you could suppose that possibly there could have been some sort of spiritual entity that had caused him to go out of control, made things worse, made things more turbulent, made things more violent. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Though, tenants that have moved into the apartment. Now, what's interesting is a lot of, like, the original stuff is still in the apartment. So the same bathtub is still there, I don't want to knock the landlord, but that's kind of gross that he, like, leaves the oven and the stove and all that in the apartment. I mean, that grosses me out. I don't know. I don't think that's okay, but whatever. So tenants of the apartment above the temple, since the horrific tragedies in 2006, they've experienced paranormal activity, feelings of being watched, voices, walls pressing in have all been reported. And actually, this house was on paranormal lockdown too, and they had gotten, Addie admitting that she was strangled. There's voices in there saying, please don't hurt her. And that TV show is actually why I know that, like, all the furniture, all the oven and the stove still resides in the apartment. Now, obviously, the spray paint is gone now. The landlord had cleaned that up, but everything for the most part is still the same. And I don't know, I know I already said it, but there's just something so disturbing that people, like, living there and, like, using an oven and a stove that somebody, like, was cooked in. And I believe the refrigerator is still there too. Really disturbing. And if you ever seen Paranormal Lockdown, it's a really good show, and I love it because they do, like, 3 days in the haunted places, and this is actually a really good episode. This is, like, one of the most disturbing ones. And so now, like, the building is currently being leased by another voodoo priestess, and who has actually turned into a museum of the paranormal, tours the apartment. So I guess no longer, possibly maybe that's why things are still there, but it was rented out by tenants, and obviously that stuff is there. Now, this story has always, like, this one, it just disturbs me. There's so many questions. Was it his PTSD? Was it that she was so violent with her bipolar disorder that they just ended up in a big clash? Or was there something more? Was it a spiritual entity? What could have happened? But I believe it's quite clear at this point that there's definitely some sort of, like, energy there, some sort of dark energy. I believe Priestess Miriam did deny the fact that there was something dark. She doesn't believe that could have been possible. And she's still open, by the way. She just moved locations. Like, I believe I already said that, though. After the fire. But whatever the case, and some people, like I said, I know I talked about this too earlier in the video, that perhaps it was just a simple fact that they were living this fabulous life, almost like camping. They were helping the wayward people of New Orleans, cooking for them and making drinks. And once everything started to get back to normal, perhaps they just couldn't handle normal life. Perhaps Addie couldn't handle normal life. And maybe, the whole, her, still wanting to be back in that camping, taking care of people lifestyle, and Zack wanting to go back with his ex-wife, that they just, they just kept fighting, and one day he snapped. And it's interesting too. Now, I've read other reports that after he killed her, he, was going to work and he was acting weird, but I think by his letter, it's clear too that he doesn't seem very remorseful of it. Though he did kill himself. The whole thing is just really interesting. And then, if he killed himself, perhaps he did feel remorse, and when he wrote the letter, he wasn't feeling remorseful because he was temporarily possessed. I mean, there's a lot of questions here. It's just because it's such an odd thing. And I don't know if you know anything about New Orleans. It's a very spiritual city of good and bad. There's a lot of evil spirits. There's a lot of good spirits. The city has so much history, and it's a beautiful city. And they were, like, and from what I've read, too, that they believe that after Katrina, so I don't know how much you guys know about hauntings, but typically, like, a haunting can remain dormant until, like, something comes along. Say, if you do construction in a house, like, you move into this house from the 1800s, and everything's fine, everything's normal. and then you start doing construction, that could stir up a ghost or paranormal activity, whatever. So people have this other idea that it's possible that from the Katrina and the hurricane, which is such a devastating hurricane, that it stirred something up. It mixed everything up. And so that's what brought out the demon that possessed Zack. And what pushed him over the edge to kill Addie. And perhaps did not have any good influence on his mental health and on his PTSD. Those are interesting claims. I'm a paranormal believer myself, so I would like to believe that there's something more sinister underneath it besides him just killing her because he had a mental outburst. From other reports of Zack also, they state that even though he had PTSD, he seemed to be a calm, all-American boy. He seemed rather normal. At the same time, it makes one think that perhaps, and I'm not trying to blame Addie in any way, but perhaps it was just a toxic relationship and they brought out the worst in each other. There's a lot of ways to read into this, but whatever the case, she is a murder victim and he is a suicide victim. And the death of either one of them is absolutely horrible. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this story. I know this is like one of my longer videos I've done. I know it's not Spooky Sunday. I kind of wanted to do something fun for a Friday night. And like I said, it's 1:30 in the morning. It's Saturday. But still, this was a lot of fun. And I was kind of wanting to do this story anyways. It's so creepy. Now I'm like, okay, I gotta go to bed after reading this, this one. I don't know. Okay, I'm normally one who can handle scary, but there's certain ones that I don't think it necessarily scares me as much as it disturbs me. And this is definitely one of the ones that I feel like are a bit more on the disturbing side. So, it's just, and also this is all kind of it's fun to do these scary stories. I love doing them. I feel like I went from a weight loss channel to just a bunch of creepy stories, but that's okay. It's something to keep your mind off of what's going on in the world right now, which I really want to do for everybody, to keep everybody's mind off all the craziness. So, I hope you like this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Like I said, my Instagram information will be down below, and I'll go ahead and I'll post that. Tag me in anything. I'd love it. Comment on what you would like next on my video. I would really appreciate that too. Everybody have a good night. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Stay 6 feet away from everybody. Stay inside your house. Only leave if you have to. Contactless delivery if you can. And everybody have a great night. Thank you so much for watching, and I truly appreciate it. Bye-bye.